Good evening as you join us here in St Eugene's Cathedral Hall in Derry on this wonderful spring day, this blue sky day, this day that has all the cherry blossoms coming out around the city. We're here this evening on Thursday of this week leading up to Good Shepherd Sunday, Vocation Sunday, the fourth Sunday of Easter, this coming weekend. And our theme, as you know, has been conversations about people and people discovering their vocation. We had a young couple on Monday looking about their sense of vocation, wanting to get married before they were 25 because marriage was important to them. Someone who spent 40 years committed to faith-based youth work here in the city because of a strong passion he felt in connection with Don Bosco. Last night we had Father Daniel McFall, who had been a joiner and worked in catering as well before he entered seminary in his mid-20s. He's now a priest in the city here. And this evening we have Hollie Frystal. Yes, Hollie Frystal, the only one that I know of in this diocese, but quite an exceptional young lady. Year 14, upper 6th as we used to call it, in Holy Cross College in Strabane, planning after she finishes her A-levels this year to go and begin a degree in the St Patrick's College, Maynooth, in Theology, History and Latin. So we're just having a conversation as to how Hollie's got to this stage in her life where faith is so important to her, a little bit perhaps about handing on the faith to your generation, Hollie, and then thirdly just about how you are seeking to discern what God's calling you to in the future. Is that okay?
Yep.
So, faith's important to you. I think I first met you when you, at 16 or something, or 15, wanted to go to Loch Derg with us. Where did that strong sense of faith in your own life come from?
Well, I think naturally faith was always important to me as a young person, and I've always been interested and fascinated by the church. And I think there's been lots of inspiration and influences in my life, first of which were my parents. And I'll give you a story actually. I think when I was about 5, Mum and Daddy took me to Ard's Monastery. And apparently, I don't remember this right enough, but they told me that I spotted a nun in a distance, and I was out walking, and she was, say, probably in her 90s, and she was fully gowned in her veil and everything, and she was sitting nearly alone on a bench, saying the rosary, and apparently when I spotted her, I says, "Oh, Mum and Daddy, isn't she so beautiful, or is she lovely?" And obviously, that's a weird thing to say for a 5-year-old, but looking back, I think I obviously admired her example. And then later on then, I also fell in love with the story of Lourdes. And actually, even though I've watched our films as a wee, I was shown the Song of Bernadette. And I think St Bernadette served as an early inspiration, so she did.
Another young woman.
Another young woman, and I was able to relate to her in many ways back then, and still now. But I was very fortunate to get to Lourdes in 2018 with the diocese before this pandemic. And I think that since then, going into secondary school, I made that conscious decision to ask questions. So that's that Latin term that you used on Monday. Was it fides?
Querens intellectum. Yeah, theology is faith seeking understanding. It begins with the faith that's in the heart, and then you try to find words to express it.
So that actually I think took off more around then, that getting curious and making that conscious decision to ask questions. And there was a teacher of mine actually from first year to 5th year, and I really looked up to him, and he was just a role model. And I know that what I admired about him was that he displayed courage when expressing his faith, and he talked about it in a natural conversation and addressed it in assemblies. And I think I admired that because, as you can imagine, growing up, a lot of peers would probably poke fun and stuff like that, because it's probably unusual for a young person to be into faith. And I can only imagine with his colleagues that he was just, they'll probably think the same. So I just admired his courage in expressing faith. And so I took that from him, and more importantly, he had patience with me, and he let me ask me questions. So it kind of led me up to here now.
Wonderful. What are your memories of Lourdes? What did you enjoy about Lourdes? What struck you most that time? You remember you were there with your family, and we were all in the same hotel.
Yeah. I remember the first night especially. We arrived in the bus, and it was late at night, and we had something to eat, and then we went down to the grotto. But the first time I ever seen it was at night time. It was just pitch black, and it was all lit up, and there was mass. and we were able to join in because it was in English, and that was the first thing that I seen, and I'll always remember that. And the baths, well, you can never forget that, the Baltic. But no, it was a lovely experience there too.
And lots of young people there too.
Yeah,
there's lots of young volunteers in Lourdes working with the sick and so on.
Aye. Well, I never went as a helper, but there's lots of young people that go, and no, I just went along with family, but definitely there's something about Lourdes that attracts everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a prayerful place. Yeah. And obviously you were there as part of a diocesan pilgrimage, so there were sort of larger groups for masses and processions and that sort of thing. And good. So you chose what for your A-level subjects then?
I chose RE, History and Media Studies.
Interesting, RE goes top of the list there too. RE, History and Media Studies. Yeah. So communication obviously is something you're interested in. Yeah. Good. And what did you enjoy about your A-level RE course? What were the sections that you found interesting?
Well, we learned both Celtic Church and ethics, but Celtic Church is probably my favourite because it's just shown how far the Church in Ireland has come from monastic roots, and the primacy of Armagh, which they're the kind of things that I enjoy the most. But at the minute we're studying Columbanus for next week.
Yes.
So it's all about the missionaries, and I suppose it's very good to, it mirrors a lot of the work going on in the diocese with St. Columkill at the minute, so no, it's good. And
how ordinary people from Ireland, male and female, travelled huge distances then without aeroplanes because they had a passion for the faith.
Yeah. Okay.
I know you're keen to work with your age group, your own peers, in terms of handing on the faith. You've been involved, in doing a lot of writing for the Net, for our diocesan newspaper, every month, tackling some subjects. You've also been involved with a book club. Can you tell us about that during Lent?
Yeah, well, the idea came from the book launch of Exploring Christus Vivit, which is Ger Gallagher's book.
The Christus Vivit, the document by Pope Francis after the Synod on Young People.
Yeah, so the book club was on it, but I used his practical kind of guide, the Red Book, to help me lead the programme. And so the idea came from the book launch, and I discussed it with Lizzie if I could do it as a Papal Cross Award project. And so no, we started at Lent, I think it was the day after Ash Wednesday, and I chose a chapter for each week and different themes. And actually Vocation was the last week, our chapter 8. And it was interesting feedback, and the young people were very happy and appreciative to get the platform too.
Had you a nice wee number with you, staying with you through the weeks?
15 every week.
15 every week? That's good. So there was room for serious discussion then. It was an intimate group.
And we were able to touch on a few sensitive topics as well, which it was good to give them the chance to speak about that. And sometimes I think maybe young people don't feel like they're heard, so maybe it's just it was nice to give them that platform.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, or what have you learnt about how we can best communicate as a church with teenagers, with young adults growing up, and I mean with idealistic young people like yourself as well? I think we haven't been good at that in the past, and in some ways the lockdown has given us few opportunities to engage.
Well, I'd say keeping a lot of the stuff online would probably be the best bet. Other than a lot of people would say that they want to keep Mass on the webcam, but I disagree with that. I would say you can't substitute that. But I think, like the book club, for instance, I wouldn't hold it in the hall. I mean, I just wouldn't come, not in a hall environment, but online. I think it reaches across the diocese to all different young people, and you get a wider audience too, and different kinds of people. And I suppose with young people, they don't want to be with their friends when it comes to things like this. I think they want to be brave enough to speak. And I suppose at the book club I didn't know any of them, but it was nice to create friendships and stuff. In terms of vocation, I would do it in schools, because a lot of young people don't grow up in a faith-based or a family, and then if they're not growing up in a family like that, then they're probably more likely not going to Mass. So the only place you could really get them would be at school. And I was saying this actually at the last week of the book club, that I think we should combine vocations, or the talk of vocations, with careers, because there really isn't a distinction in a way, because anything can be a vocation. Now I know religious orders and priesthood and all is unique, but I think by separating them it makes it a wee bit more fear, a bit more intimidating, I think, for young people, when you should really be encouraging them at that point.
Okay, we'll come to that in a minute. You've also done a lot of writing for the net. You and 5 other young people have written every month for I don't know how many months now on a range of topics: Carlo Acutis, Christus Vivit and youth ministry, baptism, vocation, a whole series of topics. And you also had an interview with Sister Natalie Becker, who's was senior religious sister in the Synod of Bishops in Rome.
Yeah.
What have you learnt out of being asked to read about Carlo Acutis, or to view his beatification on television, or read books, or write on subjects? Has it been beneficial to you?
Oh, definitely. And I think through the net, it's kept me up with the media and what's going on in the church. So I feel a lot more up to date now with things. But what I got from the Sister Natalie interview, I asked her, how can the young and old, was it discern the way forward? And what can we introduce to our parishes to encourage intergenerational relationships? And she came back with the answer that intergenerational dialogue is very much like intercultural dialogue, in that we have to try and make an effort to understand people from different generations as we do with different cultures. And so she says, in one way we could help this is with bridge builders, or bridge makers that know both generations. So I think we reflected on that too at the book club, chapter 6, I think, Young People with Roots. And so we've kind of analysed now the importance of staying attached to our roots, and how the young and old must be together in this synodality. So I'm hoping that maybe we could introduce something along those lines.
Yes, on a local parish level.
Yeah, to encourage that.
I think Carlo Acutis, that young fella of 15 or 16 who died of cancer, seems to have been an inspiring figure.
Yeah.
What struck you about Carlo, who was beatified on the 10th of October last year?
Well, I think that was actually my first story I think I wrote when I became part of the Tyrone Deanery for the net. And Carlo, I actually remember flicking through Facebook and I seen Vatican News all had it up. But if it wasn't for Mary to ask me to do the story, I wouldn't have known who he was, because I just flicked past, it all. And I got to know him more. I must have wrote about 3 or 4 articles on Carlo, leading up to the beatification and after the beatification. But I think one of the things that struck me was just his age, and how young people are noticed in the church as well. And I think it was just the way he looked as well. I think in just tracksuit bottoms and Nike shoes and
curly hair.
His youthfulness. And no, definitely. I think you say often that everyone's called to be a saint, and even at that age, he showed that. Yeah.
And he used information technology.
Yeah.
To put a website together, I think, of Eucharistic miracles.
Yeah, I forgot about that. No, that was impressive. And I think it's fitting for the day, how we're using technology now all the time. And I think I would like to know what he would have made of all this today now, us all trying to use it, because I'm sure he would have been an expert. But it's definitely one way in which we've found nowadays, I think, proclaim the good news through technology.
Yeah. And I see too, this week, in particularly in the city here, there's a big emphasis on Sister Claire Crockett, another young woman who had a real discernment, a real change of life when I think she was 17 or 18 or 19, and then ended up dying in that earthquake in Ecuador. There seems to be a fascination with young figures who've done something quite different and countercultural.
Yeah. Well, what struck me about her actually was how she more or less gave up Hollywood for Christ. And she only came from here in Derry, and I think that, I know that we're chatting about this on Monday, and I think Gemma said that she obviously was crying in the bedroom and she knew something was missing, and she had everything. She had money and fame and everything that probably a young person would wish for. But I think that's where we draw inspiration from, is that that conversion, I think. Yeah.
And how she certainly used the energy she had before her conversion experience in a different way, but she didn't become a different person.
Yeah.
She simply channeled her energy in a different direction, a very different direction.
Change of attitude, yeah. Kinda.
But she stayed musical and loved working with children and all of that, and died at 33 or 34 years of age. And probably, like Carlo, really only became famous after they had died.
And you know what? It wasn't even the Pope Francis mentioned him in the exhortation, the Christus Vivit, because I don't think anyone knew about him much before that as well.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So you're starting off to do a degree in theology and history and Latin. Very often people want to be engineers, or it's an unusual series of subjects to pick. Obviously you're interested in that whole thing, but where at the present time do you sense God might be calling you, or how are you trying to find out what God is calling you to? Or
Well, I think the way I discern is just I do it naturally, I think, sometimes without thinking. But it's usually through dialogue, so if it's praying to God or talking to other people. I know not long ago I bounced a few thoughts and ideas off someone, and I think one of the challenges, I think, for discerning from a young person's point of view is probably, without being controversial or anything, but you know, the lack of women, or the lack of the role of women in the church. I think if God's calling, say, me to serve the church directly, then I'm not too sure where to go.
yeah.
But I'm not too nervous about that, because I know that in the next few years, or in the near future, things will change. And what was the other question?
Well, I'm asking you how you discern and why you've chosen to do theology rather than do nursing or train as a primary school teacher or something. Obviously, you have a reason for studying theology and Latin.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about teaching for a long time, but then I think it was through my involvement in the diocese then, my eyes were open to other kind of positions, or potential positions in the future. So I don't think I'll move too far off it, but something maybe pastoral, like pastoral kind of leadership or something similar.
Yeah.
So I want to just help, and
You want to help?
help.
To help people
Yeah.
to do what? To help people?
Well, I think when I was talking about teaching there, instead of in an educational environment, I would rather work in a parish or a diocese. I don't know what that role consists of yet, but I suppose pastoral is a wee bit of everything. Or
Helping people know mercy and love and community and beauty and all of those things, I suppose, that Jesus did for people.
Yeah.
And we did have Aoife O'Neill on during the Lenten, the COVID conversations. She's a parish pastoral worker here in the Three Patrons parish, and we had Bethany and Lauren Doherty, for whom singing is in many ways not just their job, but their way of witnessing to Jesus and bringing great joy and hope into people's lives. Or Martin McLaughlin there on Tuesday evening talking about working with young people in the context of the Search organisation.
Yeah.
So you really see that's what you're being called to.
Yeah.
When you would tell your pals that, do they laugh, or do they say, where did you get that from, or do they actually appreciate your idealism for it?
Well, I think I might have touched on this earlier, but from first year to say about fourth year, I got stuck every day. But I suppose I was lucky, not to compliment myself or anything, but I was strong to take it.
Yeah.
And I know that's the thing, another challenge, I suppose, in discernment for other young people is that maybe they can't take it. And even though, I was able to take it, I suppose it was still disheartening and discouraging every day. But then, like Carlo, everyone's born as an original, so you'd only be happy if you're yourself. And so now they're more like up, they'd expect that of me now, and they're more mature, like. So, I think they admire it actually, and actually through the net, even though there was only 6 contributors, I have about my whole RE class that's involved in some way or another, because I've asked them to do a John Paul interview or whatever.
Good. So you've been able to walk with your pals, with your classmates, and probably influence them as well. And I'm sure all the writing you've done for the Net. The Net, by the way, is a Derry diocesan newspaper. Simply go onto the diocesan website, and you'll find the Net there. You'll find all Hollie stories and much more besides. But I'm sure writing those things has helped you in preparation for A-levels, writing essays, deciding what you want to say, communicating clearly.
Yeah.
And that obviously will be a real boon whenever you get to university as well and have to write
Yeah, well,
references.
it's definitely helped my writing skills as well. But what I love about the net as well is that you can it's a freedom of choice. You can choose whatever stories you want to do, and it really, I think we're just on the discernment there too, and challenges. I think sometimes now the more work you do, the less prayer time you get, and I think St. James says faith and good works go hand in hand. So I think you need to get that balance. But I see the net too as a way of reflecting, carrying on the story.
And I think being together in the book club with a number of people, or being together in an RE class with a number of people, or being on, say, the interviews, the six of you, you and Zara and Gemma and John and Peter and Oshin, I suppose there's another little group of like-minded people who have a passion for the same thing.
Well,
being together is good.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Getting involved in the diocese too, is I've met people like myself. So at school, there probably was a loneliness for a while, but now it's a lot different. Yeah.
So belonging is an important part of believing.
Yeah.
And probably in terms of handing on faith, it's providing an environment where people feel they can be honest and walk together, and as you said earlier on, ask those awkward questions.
Yeah.
And not be afraid of being stupid or looking stupid or.
Oh, yeah.
But you've been a good example of courage. You've been very strong. You've been very independent-minded. Been going to Lourdes, going to Loch Derg, climbing Croagh. Then you were the only one, I think, from Strabane that particular day to climb Croagh, and certainly you were the only young person going to Loch Derg with us, and you never wilted. You were very strong, very determined to see things through. And I think you know yourself remarkably well.
I do, yeah. You know what, it's where I'm comfortable, so it is, and there really is a sense of homeliness in the church to me, anyway, and it gives me real peace and contentment, yeah. Yeah,
you don't have to pretend to be somebody else. You were Hollie, and God loves Hollie where Hollie is, and God has a dream for Hollie, whatever form that's going to take. Yeah. Hollie, thank you so much for coming along. It takes a lot of courage to sit up here, and you've no idea how many are following you, sit up here and simply talk about yourself and your faith and your journey and how you're trying to discern what God is calling you to in the future. So Hollie Frystal from Strabane, thank you so much for being here this evening.